Welcome to Alberta Conservation Association's Harvest Your Own podcast, the resource for everything hunting, navigating through the field, the butcher shop, and the kitchen. Life is all about great food. Let's get started.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Brad Fenson, an avid outdoor enthusiast who has worked as a freelance journalist, photographer, and public speaker for over 3 decades. I have hunted, fished, and foraged all my life and hope to share my passion for the outdoors. Along the way, I want to encourage everyone to harvest wild proteins and enjoy the satisfaction of providing the next meal for your family. Our goal is to educate, entertain, and inspire individuals to get outdoors and create a connection between food, health, and your future meals. Welcome to Harvest Your Own. Today we have a special guest, Joshua Martin. He's best described as a hunter, husband, father, volunteer firefighter, dog trainer, and he has a title of environmental, social, and governance professional, which I really need to find out what that is. And he's a wild game enthusiast. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brad.
Yeah, I looked you up on LinkedIn, and it says on there that from yourself, I wake up every day with the goal of discovering something new about myself, about the world, about the future. I strive to be a catalyst for change, either through my own actions or by inspiring others. Most importantly, I want to contribute to a more sustainable future for Canada and the world. That's a pretty profound statement.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, a lot of what I do and how I try to live my life is reflected in that statement.
Yeah, so let's dive right into that. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And maybe you can tell us what an environmental, social, and governance professional is.
Yeah, sure. So you covered it a lot in your introduction. I think if I had to add to that, you did indicate there I'm a father to two young girls, Charlie and Sybil. They keep me and my wife pretty busy, especially my wife on a daily basis. And I'm born and raised in Ontario. I grew up in a small, traditionally French farming community called Grand Point, and I moved to Alberta following my university degree in biological sciences at the University of Windsor. So for people who don't know the area, it's on the border with Detroit. And once I moved to Alberta, I've spent the last 15 years here really working in the mining industry, first in the oil sands and now in coal, and primarily in a variety of roles related to supporting companies with their environmental performance. And so ESG, or environmental social governance, as you alluded to, is something that really kind of came out of the investing industry, where rather than just looking at how a company performs financially to inform your decision making around investing in that company, a lot of people are now taking into consideration how companies perform from an environmental perspective as well. How are they looking to minimize their impact on the environment? How are they looking at inclusion, diversity, equity from a social perspective, and are they operating in a way that has strong ethical business practices? And I've always gravitated to the kinds of roles that, while they aren't focused on the investing side specifically, are tied to kind of helping the companies I work with really show up from an environmental perspective, manage their impact, and really do better. At the end of the day, I think there's a real dichotomy, especially today, on kind of where we're accepting of different industries. And I think at the end of the day, there's a place for every industry in our province, in our country, in the world, but that has to be balanced with a lot of different factors. And one of those is ensuring we're operating in a way that's sustainable and ensures we have a strong environment and legacy to pass on to future generations.
Yeah, and I believe that's really critical in Alberta because of the resources we have and the activities we have going on. And I think it's an important message to people out here that, oil and gas, oil sands, coal development, it can happen in what's the best words to use, in the best practices for providing what we need for energy resources, but also maintaining our environment.
Yeah, and the one thing I always tell people is, they're not mutually exclusive. There's a perception, I think, of you to look at a lot of the development that happens in a lot of these companies as, these giant corporations who are greedy and just looking for
Right.
a quick dollar. And the fact of the matter is, these companies are made up of people like me who are passionate about the environment, who are passionate about their province and their country, and do think there's ways to do it in a way that's sustainable. And I think that gets lost in the narrative. And at the end of the day, there are ways to do it wrong, and we don't always get it right, but there are ways to do it right, and there's ways to do it better. And I think if we continue to focus on looking for those solutions, we'd be in a better place.
Very interesting. Where did you get your interest in conservation? Obviously, it's been there a long time. You went to school, you've moved west, you've started a family, you've changed careers a few times with different companies, but it's definitely a passion.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been reflecting on that, and I grew up in a small, as I mentioned, farming community. And so I wouldn't say we were a particularly outdoorsy family compared to anyone else. I spent a lot of time playing in the streets with my friends, being outside, running around. Had a very strong and supportive family. My parents still are very supportive. And my father, he grew up on a farm and on an acreage. And he spent a lot of time when he was younger trapping and selling the furs for a dollar and stuff like that back then to pay for whatever he was buying when he was a kid. And I was born on an acreage next to that. But eventually we moved into the community. My father actually ran the gas station and tire shop there for 20 years. And we would get out as a family, and there was always a strong interest in wildlife in the home. My father was an artist. He did a lot of carving and paintings, and all those carvings and paintings were, he carved decoys and used to enter decoy competitions with ducks, and carved a giant fish out of a tree trunk, did different things like that. And so wildlife was always present, but not in a way that we were actively participating with it in terms of hunting or trapping. We also knew the local conservation officer, and so I did spend a few trips out, banding ducks, and I was part of Ducks Unlimited. So there was always this kind of low level of interest in wildlife and hunting and the environment, but it really started to grow, just sort of as I pursued my university degree. And then I'd say moved out to Alberta, where relative to Southern Ontario, the amount of wildlife and outdoor activities and just the landscape is difficult to stay away from.
It seems like the land of opportunity when you do get out here.
Totally, yeah.
So very interesting background. I think a lot of us grew up with that love for the outdoors and wildlife and those types of things. I was lucky. I had a family that hunted. My dad, grew up hunting with his dad, but I'd have to say he never hunted to the extent that I do. But we still get out with him and get him out on. He still loves grouse hunting and duck hunting and stuff like that. But how did you get actually started in hunting? You moved to Alberta, started a career, started a family, and you had time for more recreation.
Yeah, that's been an interesting journey. On my way to Alberta, believe it or not, I read a book called The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan. Probably one of the first books I ever read outside of what I was assigned by my teachers. And in that book, he talks about being a vegetarian, but interestingly, towards the end, he goes through an entire chapter on going on this wild boar hunt and going from the process of, hunting the boar, killing the boar, cleaning the boar, cooking the boar, eating the boar, and how even though he was a vegetarian, he really appreciated and felt much more connected to his food by being part of the entire process. And so after reading that, I thought, I really should get into hunting. I really should do this. If I'm going to continue to eat meat as a consumer, I should be able to take that life. When I was young, for example, we used to go in the backyard and shoot pellet guns, and I used to shoot pop cans because I did not like shooting and killing those birds for no good reason. I had neighbors who didn't necessarily mind that, but I certainly didn't enjoy it. And I remember once I thought I accidentally hit a bird that I thought was something else, and I was just completely distraught. So I really reflected on the fact that if I'm going to eat meat, I should be able to take that life. And that was what really kickstarted the idea of, okay, how could I get into hunting? And then, you go through the whole process of trying to learn that as someone new to the province, but went through and got my firearms license as a starting point. And while I was in Fort McMurray, I did that, and I had all this opportunity to go hunting in Fort McMurray, which for people who know the area is just a great place for a lot of hunting, and never took it. Finally, I moved to Calgary and knew someone who was going out hunting, and finally wrote them and just said, hey, like, I'd love to get out hunting. I have my firearms license. I have no idea what to do. I don't know where to go. I've like zero experience. And, he was gracious enough to invite me out on a hunt with him. And that's really where it started. The funny part about that story is I think it was 2 days before I said, hey, well, what am I got my firearms license. Am I good to go? And he said, oh, I forgot. You need to get your, Alberta wildlife. So I need to do the hunter's education course. You need to do that before you can get your license. And I said, well, okay, how do I do that? And so he pointed me to the online place to go do it. And I spent the entire night, the day before my hunt, basically for 6 hours or whatever it was. I blew through it, but doing this course online the day before I'm supposed to go hunting to just like be able to get the license. And it was just it was a very interesting and stressful process. But that first day out hunting, when we went, I was pretty much hooked and knew it's something I wanted to continue to do. And it kind of just went from there. After that, I started to really spend more time hunting with others, but also starting to teach myself.
Well, crash course like that, everything's still fresh in your mind when you get into the field.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we didn't see anything that day, and other than, a bunch of tracks in the snow, which was great, which I also realized after learning a bit more, I had been following those backwards. So funny how the first time you go out, you think you know what you're doing, and I'm trailing a deer here. And then when I got home and I started looking up more stuff, I'm like, oh, those tracks were pointing in the opposite direction. But good note for the next time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I still find every time I go out hunting, I can learn something.
Yeah.
No matter how much you think you know, there's something out there to explore and figure out. And sometimes it's an individual animal that's real wary and more alert than the others, and figuring out how to get close or find them in daylight hours is part of the puzzle.
Yeah, and that's probably what I love the most about hunting, and what's I think gotten me hooked is there isn't a time that I come out from a hunt that I haven't learned something new or taken something away that I know I'm going to take with me on the next hunt. And I'm not sure there's a whole lot of activities where there's that level of opportunity to learn every single time you go out, because at the end of the day, it's such an uncontrolled environment. And, you just kind of like you alluded to, every individual animal is different and unique, and while deer will all react on average in the same way, they don't always react the same way. And, you're always learning out there.
And it's interesting. I find that is my reward. I come home without a deer. Other people are like, oh, you didn't have a great day, but it's like, oh, I had a really good day. I found out where these deer were moving, where they're feeding, where they're bedding, and I found areas where I can set up if the wind's blowing this way or that way. And I come home inspired and feeling great about the adventure and the trip and what the next day might hold.
100%. Like, I definitely judge success of my hunts based on how I feel I showed up out there, and that's not dictated on whether or not I bring home an animal, but whether or not I learn from my mistakes the previous time, or if I made them again, whether or not I've learned something new on my way out, and whether or not I really just kind of surrendered to the experience out there and sort of left everything else behind for the day.
Yeah, don't put pressure on yourself to shoot something every time you go out. It's not what it's about.
No, and you know what? I'm sure a lot of people say this, but at the end of the day, if I knew I was going to go out and shoot something every time, I'm just as good to go to the grocery store. I mean, you're not out there to necessarily come home with meat every time, though it's definitely nice. I think at the end of the day, it's really about the journey and the experience out there. And if you are able to bring home some meat for the family, then that's great. And if you're not, then so long as you've kind of left that area in a better place than it was before you went into it, and you can come back to it next week, then that's great too.
Yeah.
This podcast is produced for Harvest Your Own, a program dedicated to those who want to reconnect with food and health through their experiences outdoors. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a resource for individuals to learn more about hunting and the outdoors. There's information to get you started and ensure that your compass stays pointed in the right direction to be successful. Where's your next meal coming from?
My successes are judged on a season. If I have meat in the freezer at the end of the hunting season, I feel like I've been blessed.
If my wife judged my success on the meat in the freezer at the end of the season, she wouldn't think I was very successful, but definitely. And I think at the end of the day, I think that's what's also great about hunting. Success is really an individual thing. There's no one out there measuring or there's no clear line in terms of what it means to finish that race or win that competition. For some people, it is bringing home meat. For some people, it's bringing home a trophy. For some people, it's just getting out there. And that's where I think I also love about hunting. It's really an individual experience that you can define for yourself.
Right. How many years have you been a hunter?
I think it's been almost 10 years now.
10?
Yeah.
Tell me about your first success.
Well, my first success is, really went back to that spot that I mentioned on my very first hunt that I'd been taken to, and it was the following year. A friend and myself went out. We went and found a cup block out there, and we sat up and started watching that cup block at first light, and got lucky. A couple deer walked out, and we were able to. I was able to get a couple shots off on that deer, and it's kind of a long story, so it depends if we want to go into it.
So it's interesting. You had a story that was published in Conservation Magazine called "A Deer, a Dog, and a Donor Walk into a Bar." It's a pretty interesting title. Yeah,
it was a little bit of a play on words there, and it's really a story about my first harvest and everything that came from that. So, I'd mentioned earlier about the first time I went out hunting. The following year, I went out there with a friend who had also been on that hunt, and we thought we'd go back out. We weren't successful the previous year and go out and look for a deer. We managed to set ourselves up on a cup block that we had kind of come across that first season and thought it'd be a good spot for some deer to be coming in to browse that first light, given it was fairly fresh. And we were lucky enough to see a few deer come out. One of them was a small little spiker, 4 points. And, I raised my rifle and I took a shot, and nothing kind of happened. I looked up from the scope and all the deer were just sitting there. So I chambered another round and I shot again. And that time the deer kind of looked up and started trotting off. And, I was pretty disappointed that I'd missed my first 2 shots at my first deer that I had in my sights. But when you get into it and you start looking at it, you realize it's probably not that uncommon.
It's not.
But I'd been told, I remember someone telling me, deers will often circle around after whatnot. So I sort of climbed up the ridge and was thinking, well, maybe based on the direction he went kind of went around the backside. And so I spent some time looking for him and couldn't relocate him. So I sat down under a tree and was kind of looking down, and I could feel the warmth of the sun on me and was sort of just letting that adrenaline fall through me, and kind of looked over my shoulder to the right, and all of a sudden I saw the deer coming back, walking by me. He was probably 15 yards away. And I thought, oh, okay, that's weird. And he sort of was looking at me, and I just slowly turned around, and I don't remember if I was laying down or if I was kneeling down. I mean, at that point, my adrenaline was through the roof. But I do remember raising my rifle, giving myself a second to think about where my partner was, because we had split up, realized he was, out of harm's way, and took that shot and, dropped that deer. And it was just such a mix of emotions in terms of when I walked up to that deer, recognizing I'd just taken its life, but also just the sort of excitement and what's the word I'm looking for? It's always so hard to describe. But really, it's not gratitude, but it was happiness at the end of the day, and just all the work that had gone into getting there. I mean, I'm shortening the story, but there was a lot that went into trying to take that deer, right? And, made it happen, and it just felt really good. But at the same time, I felt really bad for that deer.
Those mixed emotions never go away. I think it comes from respect for what we're doing and the critters we're chasing.
Yeah, and I've heard someone say it before, right? Like if the day comes that you don't have those mixed emotions anymore, and all you have is the thrill of the kill, then you should probably hang up your gun and stop hunting. And I do agree with that. And so, it was just a really exciting time. We kind of, celebrated, talked about the story of what just happened when my partner came over, and then the real hard work started. And, we decided and made the decision to take that deer out by hand, which we did. So we didn't go back for the sled. We just dragged it out over a reclaimed cup block, and it was pretty physical. And to make a long story short, during that time, the last few years, I'd been in end-stage renal failure. So I was born with what's called polycystic kidney disease. It's hereditary. And eventually my kidneys were going to fail on me, but they had already kind of started. And shortly after that hunt, basically it was so physical, I had sort of put my system in overdrive And within a month, we realized there wasn't much more we could do. The doctors removed my kidneys and they put me on dialysis. So I was being, at that point, I was completely dependent on a machine to keep me alive. And I often think back, I have that deer. I did a European mount on that deer. It was my first deer, and I have it in the house. And, there's not a day that I go by it and look at it and think, it's because of you, or partially because of you, that my kidneys went as soon as they did. So it's definitely, I think everyone always remembers their first hunt. My first hunt was particularly special. But yeah, from there, I ended up, taking it easy for a while because physically, I wasn't in the shape I was in pre-dialysis, but I was still really interested in hunting. So my wife and I, we wanted to get a dog. So I talked her into getting a hunting dog, which, his name's Sir. We still have him today. He's a Weimaraner. He's about 7 or 8 now. And boy, do they have a lot of energy.
At least he's out of the puppy stage. He's in the prime of his life.
Yeah, I'm not sure those hunting dogs ever get out of it, but yes, he's definitely not as bad as he was. But yeah, we love him. And yeah, I spent the next couple of years really learning how to train a hunting dog. And that again was like a whole new experience as well. I thought I knew nothing about, big game hunting. I definitely knew nothing about how to train a hunting dog properly. But there's a lot of great resources out there for people. So I joined the Prairie Vista Navda Hunting Dog Association out of Calgary, and I actually think there's a second chapter now here in the north in Edmonton. And talk about a great group of people who just go out of their way to help people who are interested in the sport learn how to train their dog and give you an opportunity to get there and really hunt.
Yeah. And you picked a breed that has lots of instinct.
Definitely. Definitely picked a breed who's got that natural instinct. And I tell anyone anything that's wrong with him is because of me, not because of him.
That's with any dog training.
Yeah, exactly. Right. They will do, they know what to do without really any of your help. And so they need a little bit of, I think at the end of the day, you end up training them to work with you as opposed to teaching them how to hunt. And it's a really great experience. And I'm not sure what I like more at the end of the day. I think big game hunting is a lot of fun and a big challenge, but I'm not sure there's anything better than when you go out and you watch your dog, hold a solid point, wait to the command to go retrieve, and then bring that right back to your hand. It's sort of like it's like synchronized swimming,
right,
or something just really choreographed. And when it comes together well, there's nothing more beautiful than that.
And it's got multiple rewards all at once.
Exactly. Yeah.
I hunt with a few guys that train dogs, and it is their absolute passion. They've given up big game hunting. They only pursue upland. And when we go for a walk, they often don't even bring their gun because it's totally about the dog experience. They want to see it do it right. They want to control it. Their reward is their dog.
Yeah. And the other great thing I love about it is it's a social, it's a bit of a social hunting experience. You go big game hunting, you can't sit around and talk and, laugh and joke around because you're trying to be quiet and you're trying to get out there, but you can afterwards, obviously, or before. But, I love taking, especially people who are new to hunting or people who, I enjoy being with out for a big game, for a upland hunt because, it's really hiking with your gun. But you get to have a conversation. Your dog's out there having a good time. If they know what they're doing, let you know when they found a bird, and you get into some action, and then you kind of reset, and it's just it's a different pace. So I think with all the different types of hunting, there's so many different ways to hunt. There's so many benefits to each of them, and they all have their own unique experience when you're out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I like taking people for their first hunt out for waterfowl. It's very social. You don't have to be quiet. You can make lots of noise. There's lots of banter. There's lots of talk. There's lots of learning lessons, but there's usually lots of shooting too. Not always a lot of hitting, but it's very rewarding for a first experience to get out there and not have to be shushed and be able to ask the questions you want. And upland birds fall into the same category.
Yeah. And the other thing I find too with, to your point with waterfowl, and then I'd say upland to a lesser extent, is you actually get to use your gun.
Right.
So, if you go for a big game hunt, you don't see any game, you're not just shooting off rounds here and there. And I think for anyone who does enjoy hunting and enjoys shooting, which is fun as well with waterfowl hunting, as long as you're into some birds, or same with upland, you're probably getting to shoot that gun off a few times. And that's always nice because, there's just something to going out there and not pulling the trigger at all and then putting that gun away and kind of thinking, oh, okay, well, I didn't even get to use it.
I often say that if it wasn't for waterfowling, I'd be a lot more unsuccessful at deer hunting, because sort of get it out of my system before I put in, some years I put in 20 days before I even get an opportunity at a deer. So
This podcast was made possible by Alberta Conservation Association and the Harvest Your Own community. If you're interested in harvesting your own food, there's a comprehensive collection of information to gain insight and knowledge. Head to the field, harvest your own protein, prepare it, and taste the results. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a library of information from getting started and geared up to processing, butchering, and cooking wild game to make the connection between health and food.
Yeah, and that was interesting because what was really crazy was I ended up getting a call and got, I'd been on dialysis for a few years. I got this call and was lucky enough to be told there was a deceased donor who was a match for me. So rushed to the hospital, went through a transplant, which was an incredible thing. And kind of how I mentioned in the story, it was again those mixed emotions when I was sitting there, because here I was and my family, we were all super excited that I was about to get a kidney that would just, completely change our lifestyle and give me a new lease on life, hopefully, if everything worked. And here there was probably somewhere else in the hospital, a family who had made the difficult decision to donate their daughter's or son's organs. I found out later it was their daughter. They were losing a life while we were gaining one. And so there's this, again, mixed emotion that you have through that experience. And once I recovered from that, my energy levels were up and my hunting interest just went into overdrive. I was just reading everything I could about it. I wanted to get out. I was just prepping and waiting for November to get out hunting again, but really focused on the big game because I hadn't been able to do it. And it was that Christmas that we ended up getting a letter in the mail from the donor's parents. And so, through the donor program, which, I really do encourage anyone who, on your license, I think now you have to opt out to be a donor, but, I really encourage people, unless you have religious beliefs or other reasons that you really don't agree with it, to sign that donor card. It makes a huge difference for anyone. Every time, generally speaking, I think it's 7 or 8 organs are donated, or 7, 8 people benefit from a donor. And, I'm one of them, and it makes a tremendous difference in a lot of lives if you do that. But anyways, through the program, it's anonymous. You don't know who the donor is. You don't find any of that out, but they do allow them to send letters. And so the parents sent me a letter, and in that letter, they sort of wished me well and hoped I was doing well. And that, they also told me about their daughter. And one of the things they mentioned in there was how she was really big into the outdoors. She loved camping, she loved hiking, and she really loved hunting. And it was just interesting to read that and then to reflect on how, since my transplant, I had really taken on, I was always interested in hunting, but again, not to the degree that it had come out. And even my parents and my wife, and we're all like, what's happened to you? Like, you used to love suits and ties, now you're looking for camo all the time. Like, what's happening? And I looked into it, and long story short, there's a thing they call cell memory. And there's a theory out there that they say people who have received transplanted organs from other patients, whether it be hearts or whatnot, seem to exhibit or demonstrate some of the characteristics of their donor. So maybe they really like spicy food now, or in my case, maybe now maybe part of my real strong obsession with being outdoors more and hunting is just that donor's personality, permeating through me.
It's a full expression of sharing life.
Yeah, exactly. And so, it was just a really interesting tie together between how, I shot my first deer, pulled it out of the bush, through that lost my kidneys, got Sir, my dog, got kind of into hunting again. But then, received this kidney, and kind of that connection just seemed a bit full circle, and pulled that together in a story that I felt was worth sharing.
It was a great story. I really enjoyed it. I read it when it came out. I read it again this week. But, you said something in there. Hunting, by its very nature, is a spiritual activity. And I can see why you would say that with your complete experience in terms of becoming a hunter, being an organ recipient, and taking life to its fullest afterwards.
Yeah, and that experience has definitely shaped me in a lot of ways. And I think it's one of those things where if you've never been out hunting, then it's probably hard to really grasp that statement. But the way I see it is, and for me, and I think before we started chatting here, Brad, I think you've alluded to it, where I can go out for a hike with my family, and we'll go for a hike, and it'll be great. We'll have a nice time. I'll be looking around, paying attention. I'll be kind of immersed in nature on that hike with my family. But the second I go back to that trail and I'm carrying my rifle or my bow, and it's before dawn, and I'm walking quietly through, and I'm listening and I'm paying attention, it's a completely different experience. And you sort of become part of nature. You're not just a passive observer in it. You're a part of it. You're an active participant in that little ecosystem. And there's something that transcends you just as an individual in those moments that is different than when you're out there hiking. And so I've always found, I'm not a very spiritual person. I was raised Catholic, but I wouldn't say we ever practiced. And but there's something about being out hunting that is really a different experience. It's hard to put into words, and I think you have to experience it to really understand it.
It is, and it's part of the addiction. It's why I can never get enough. I always want to be out there. It becomes your church in a way.
It definitely does. And I think for people who often, criticize hunting or question, the ethics behind it and focus on, again, the killing of the animal and just the outcomes of that, they're really missing the point. And I think part of it is because they've never actually done it. And I think for most people, if they took the time to really experience it, and when you hear things like, well, you can just go out and hike and take a picture, and you're right, you can. And I know you're a photographer as well, Brad, like going out for a hike and getting pictures is definitely something you can do, but it's not the same experience as being out there on a hunt. And I think it's fine if you're not willing to pull the trigger, that's entirely fine. But it's just something that at the end of the day, I'm not sure I ever want to not do again. And to your point, I know I definitely spend more time out there than I should. But I'm really looking forward to the day that my daughters, and they're already getting there, are excited to get out there with me and really being able to pass that on to them.
That's a very special day. I've got twin girls, 5 years old, 6 this month. We've been taking them out since they were 18 months old. They love running the decoys around, retrieving birds, and they even help clean them and cook them. And it's part of the lifestyle they're growing up in, and they absolutely love it. Yeah,
and so we, I haven't really taken my girls out much yet. They're 5 and 3, and so similar ages. But when I bring home, some of the hunting I really love doing too is crane hunting. So that's been a lot of fun, and I went on one last season and brought them home. And when I bring the game home, my girls will come out and they'll help me clean them. They'll ask questions. They'll learn all about it. And they just, I think it's the 3 R's we talk about, right? Recruiting. What are the 3 R's? Recruiting,
recruitment, retention, and
re-engagement, or something like that. I'll have to look those up. But where I'm going with this is, I think one of the things that's interesting is we often talk about recruiting new hunters, and I think with my daughters, I've really looked at it as a rewilding of just, I think there's a rewilding we could be focusing on instead of recruiting. And what I mean by that is, like, we evolved as hunters. We evolved being part of nature and being out there. Our kids, like my daughters, and I'm sure with yours, have a full appreciation and understanding of that circle of life and of hunting and of what it means to take a life that, and the weight of it. Like, and they're 5 and 3 and they understand that. It doesn't make them happy. They don't feel good about it when I come home and they see that crane that I brought home, but they appreciate it and they understand why. And I think all we're doing there is, if you leave children to themselves and you share that lifestyle with no bias and no agenda, and I don't push it on them. I don't tell them that hunting is great and, all these things that make it sound like I want them to like it. I just present it as it is. They will naturally accept it and want to be part of it because we've evolved that way. And so often when I hear about recruiting, I find it's a bit disingenuous in the sense that, like, I don't think we should have to actively recruit people into it, because it seems and sounds as though it's something they were never part of. And yet I think we've been part of it for thousands of years, and it starts just with our children and just taking it and presenting it to them as it is. And if we all just took that approach, I think, hunting would be a lot more, maybe accepted is the wrong word, but I just think there's a way in which we can, approach the conversations around hunting, particularly with our kids and the younger generation, that is really focused on bringing us back to our roots.
It opens their hearts and their eyes and makes them more aware of their surroundings and the great outdoors. If we are out in the driveway here this spring, geese fly over, they'll look up, and they've been doing this since they were 3. They know if they're Canadas or snows or specks. And when they hear cranes, they're automatically on, their radar goes on looking in that stratosphere where those birds are often circling. And, in the yard, when deer comes in, it's a special moment, and they see the rough grouse, and they're very aware of their surroundings where other people just aren't. And they're looking for it. They notice it. They know what they are, even at a young age. So it makes my heart happy to see that kind of thing happen. And I think sharing the outdoors with your family and kids and future generations is important, so that appreciation is always there.
100%. We just recently moved to the Crow's Nest Pass about a year ago, and we were previously living in Calgary, which was great. We had a good time in Calgary, but to be surrounded by the mountains and everything there has just been a complete game changer for us. And the city vibrates at a different frequency. We're certain, I know you're here on an acreage, and so you can appreciate it too. Just being away from that hustle and bustle makes a big difference. But to your point on seeing it, I mean, we'll drive regularly, wherever we're going. There's rarely is there a day that we don't see some bighorn sheep on the side of the highway, or some deer in our front yard or down the street, or some elk, in one of the acreages. And my daughters never tire of seeing them. They don't ever stop getting excited. And we got binoculars in the car for both of them, so every time we pull up, they can pull those out and take a look. And I think there's just that appreciation of being around them and connected with them that, I know they'll carry with them through the rest of their life. And hopefully it'll mean, going back to the conservation, that they'll take that with them and continue to ensure that there's, that focus on conservation and wildlife in the future.
Well, as a new hunter, less than 10 years, you've got a very interesting perspective on the whole realm of hunting and conservation, the outdoors, family, all of it. And I would encourage you to keep doing it. I remember when you called me to talk about journalism and writing articles and stuff. And, you did win an award for your story. It was first place in the hunting feature category with Outdoor Writers of Canada. And I congratulate you on that. And I'd really encourage you to keep writing, because your messages are wonderful and they're required. And sometimes we need a little different perspective on things to not only value what we do, but value life.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Like you said, it was interesting. It was, when I decided I had this story to tell, it was like, how do I do this? And how do you get involved in writing? It just seemed like such a foreign thing. I mean, I grew up reading magazines, but I'd never given a second thought to how you get an article in a magazine. And it was really great, and really appreciated you taking the time to chat with me, because it's really was the driver for me to finally kind of make it happen. Really all I needed to do was submit an article and hope someone thought it was interesting enough to publish. And fortunately, conservation did. And that was a great opportunity. And I've continued to write and have some more things kind of in the back burner. Part of it's, as we alluded to, I got a pretty busy life, so finding the time for it. But in terms of, now I'm a member of the, as you mentioned, the Outdoor Writers Association of Canada, but now it's a Professional Outdoor Media Association of Canada. And I'm also the director for the Midwestern region. So I volunteer with the board to help with that. And part of the reason I did that is how great of an organization, again, it is. I mean, I'm a consumer of knowledge. And so I've always read. And as I got into hunting, getting all the different magazines, Alberta Outdoorsman and soon to be Alberta Outdoors, which is great. Outdoor Canada. And, so I've read your articles for years. I've read Ken Bailey's articles for years. I've read TJ Swanky's articles for years. And so to just openly have an opportunity to have conversations with people like yourself and Ken and TJ, and to benefit from those years of experience and knowledge has been incredible. And I guess I just say I was a bit surprised to how open and honest and how willing people are to share their time and experience. And I think that's, again, not necessarily probably something I should be surprised about, because I think that's true, again, of anyone who's involved in the outdoors or in hunting. Pretty inclusive community and willingness to share among members. And yeah, it's been a great experience. And so I just encourage anyone who's got a story to tell, to reach out to myself, to other writers, and find out how to get involved. Reach out to the Professional Outdoor Media Association of Canada, join as a member, and you'll benefit pretty quickly from that. And to Brad's point, we all have a story to tell. They're all going to be different. And I think really you just have to write about what you're interested in and what makes you happy. And, whether or not a story gets published sometime isn't really, again, the measure of success. It's actually just getting that story out there and telling it. Yeah,
that's a lot of times half the battle. And being able to help mentor people into the journalism field or writing is rewarding in itself. I think we've had a very powerful conversation today. Not only have we talked about how hunting can change your life, but we talked about organ donors and recipients, and maybe dabbling in journalism. So very insightful in terms of different things. Any parting words that you'd like to share?
Oh, any parting words I'd like to share?
It's tough. Like, it could be about hunting. It could be about, you already talked about organ donors, which I think is really important. And your message about having that spirituality and connection to the donor, I mean, it made me reflect even more on being a donor in the future.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think that's probably one of the main messages. And again, only because I've benefited from that so much personally. I know so many other people I have. My mother's currently on dialysis, awaiting, a kidney hopefully in the future. And it's a very small thing. I mean, again, unless you have very strong religious beliefs or other reasons why you don't want to do it, there's no sense in taking those organs to the grave with you. And you can really benefit someone's life. As far as hunting, I'd say, I think probably my biggest message is, if you can, take that opportunity to continue to share your stories about hunting with those who maybe aren't part of it. Again, I think it's not so much about recruitment as it is about rewilding. And I think getting people to just reconnect with something that's always been part of us. And in some cases, people have been biased by others' opinions or what's out there in the media. And all it takes is getting them out there for one little hunt, whether or not, again, they want to pull the trigger to really experience it and understand it. One of the great things I also participated in last year, and maybe the real parting message is, take that opportunity to mentor, whether it's mentoring someone, as I mentioned here, through journalism, who's looking to get involved, or mentoring someone on a hunt. Out in Blairmore, the Hillcrest Fish and Game Club puts on an excellent mentored hunt every year. And I got to take out a mentee last year. And the main message for all our kids on those hunts are, we're going to get you out there. You're going to learn to shoot your rifle. You're going to learn what it's like to get out and try and hunt some big game. And when we get out there, you're going to get your scope on a deer. And if you have the opportunity to pull the trigger, we want you to take it. But if you don't want to pull that trigger, that's fine. It's not about pulling the trigger. It's about just experiencing the hunt. And for a lot of the kids, that's all it's about. And I think for everyone else, it's the same thing. Get out there and experience it. And then if it's not for you, that's fine. But for those of us who appreciate it, and for those of us who it forms a big part of our life, try and understand why that is, because it's
special moments, life-changing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming in today. I really enjoyed this particular podcast. I think we've got some great messages here, and continue to write. We love hearing your stories and share your experiences with everyone as we discussed today.
Yeah, great. It was great to be out here, Brad. Thanks for having me.
We hope to inspire people to reconnect with nature and appreciate where your food comes from by harvesting your own. For more information on getting started or to learn specifics about the Field to Fork experience, visit harvestyourown.ca and follow on Facebook and Instagram. Check back often for new material, recipes, and videos that are posted regularly. Please subscribe to Harvest Your Own podcast and take the time to rate and review the show to help us build a dedicated core of passionate hunters as our regular audience. Until next time, embrace the outdoors and all it has to offer. Thanks for joining us.